Good evening. I'm Colleen Marshall, host of NBC4's The Spectrum and anchor at NBC4. Thank you for joining us for tonight's Republican primary debate for the U.S. Senate between State Senator Matt Dolan, Mike Gibbons, Josh Mandel, Neil Patel, Mark Pukita, Jane Timken, and J.D. Vance. We now go live to Central State University in Wilberforce.
Welcome to Voters First, the 2022 Ohio U.S. Senate Republican primary debate. Sponsored by the Ohio Debate Commission. Coming to you live from Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio.
Funding for this debate is provided by AARP Ohio. This program is made possible by the following organizations: the Shar and Chuck Fowler Family Foundation, the Cleveland Foundation, the George Gund Foundation, and the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation. The Murray and Agnes Season Good Government Foundation, Tecovas Foundation, City Club of Cleveland, and the Ohio Association of Broadcasters. Hello, and on behalf of the Ohio Debate Commission, welcome to Voters First, the 2022 Ohio U.S. Senate Republican primary debate. I'm Karen Kassler, Chief of the Ohio Public Radio and Television Statehouse News Bureau. We are coming to you live from the Paul Robeson Cultural and Performing Arts Center on the campus of Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio. Joining me on stage are the Republican contenders hoping to fill the seat left vacant by retiring U.S. Senator Rob Portman. The candidates facing off in the Republican primary election are J.D. Vance, Mike Gibbons, Jane Timken, Josh Mandel, Mark Pukita, Matt Dolan, and Neil Patel. Thank you all for joining us. The participants were selected in accordance with the guidelines of the Ohio Debate Commission, a coalition of state news organizations, universities, and civic groups whose mission is to create better debates for better elections. The format and rules for this debate were agreed to by all of the candidates. The participants will have 30 seconds for opening remarks, and then questioning will begin. You will each have 90 seconds to answer, followed by a 30-second rebuttal at my discretion. Not every candidate will answer every question. Questions for today's debate come from residents around the state who submitted them to the Ohio Debate Commission and from news that's come up in recent days. We remind the live audience here to mute your phones and refrain from applause, making noise, or attempting to participate or influence the debate. No photography or recording is allowed. A random drawing determined the order of opening remarks and questions, as well as the positions on stage. And with that, let's get started. Jane Timken, you have 30 seconds for your opening statement.
Good evening. I'm Jane Timken. I'm running to be your next United States Senator to fight for the America First agenda. I'm a mom on a mission, ready to take our country back, to fight for American jobs, border security, and parents' rights in education. We've got a lot of show horses in this race, but I'm the workhorse who will lead with grit and grace. President Trump asked me to take over the Republican Party, and I delivered Ohio for President Trump, just like I'm going to deliver for Ohio families. I will always put Ohio first and America first.
Neil Patel, you're up next.
I'm Neil Patel, and I'm thankful to my parents and Almighty God to brought me in this world. And I'm really thankful to Ohioan and Mother America to give me bread, butter, and my family. Now, my time to serve our state and our country. This is my time to serve. And as your next senator, I said that I'd like to protect and secure our Constitution.
Thank you. Mike Gibbons, your opening statement.
I'm Mike Gibbons, and I'm a businessman, not a politician. I'm a constitutional conservative without apology. If you have any doubts about my conservatism, I've been endorsed by Rand Paul, and that should allay your fears. I was born on the top of a double house in the inner city of Cleveland, and when we made it big, we moved to Parma. 3 decades ago, I started a business with a desk and a phone in Cleveland, Ohio, and I've achieved my American dream. I want to make sure your kids and your grandkids achieve that same American dream.
Josh Mandel, your opening statement.
My name is Josh Mandel. I'm running for the United States Senate for 3 main reasons. Gideon, who's 5 years old, Judah, who's 7 years old, and Rosie, who's 8 years old. This ain't about us anymore, ladies and gents. This is about saving our country for my kids, for your kids, and for your grandkids. The radical left, the secular left, they are trying to destroy America. And right now, what we need in Washington to defeat the secular left, to defeat the radical left, to defeat Biden and Schumer and Pelosi and save this country for our kids and grandkids is fighters. I am a Marine. I am a fighter.
Mark Paquita, your opening statement.
Hi, I'm Mark Paquita. I'd like to be your next U.S. Senator. I'm a successful entrepreneur and business person. I've created over 300 jobs for Ohioans, more than all my Senate opponents combined. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this because I believe our country is in peril, and I've got 2 grandchildren, and I do not want the American dream taken from them. And so I want to go to Washington to fight for my grandchildren, but also your children, your grandchildren, and your great-grandchildren. Thank you.
J.D. Vance, your opening statement.
Yeah, first I'd like to ask the fellow candidates up here, please don't comment on my wife this evening. I don't want to have a Will Smith situation at tonight's debate. I'm J.D. Vance. I'm running for Senate for the basic idea that our country is a disaster. Food and energy prices are skyrocketing. Joe Biden's about to blunder us into a war with Russia, and our border is a total crisis zone. And what you'll hear, unfortunately, too much is too many slogans and too many talking points from politicians. I hope what you hear from me tonight is substance, actual ideas for how to solve these problems, and enough respect for you to talk to you like you're not an idiot, which is unfortunately what too many politicians refuse to do.
Matt Dolan, your opening statement.
From the start, my campaign has been about Ohio. I know who I'm fighting for, and I know what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for your security, your international security, your national and border security, your neighborhood security, and your financial security. And a week ago tonight, when I raised my hand, we also realized that I am the only one going to Washington looking forward to take on the crisis caused by the Biden administration and to submit Republican conservative ideas for tomorrow's possibilities.
Thank you all. Now we move on to questions. And you'll all answer this question. You'll all have 90 seconds to answer, and we'll start with Jane Timken. I want to start with an issue about which we received more questions than any other, so I'll ask this question in a way that represents many of them. It's about the 2020 election. There were more than 60 lawsuits filed by former President Trump and his supporters challenging the validity of the election, all in states that he lost. None of the cases were judged to have merit. Many were tossed out by federal judges who had been appointed by President Trump. Claims that in some states more votes were cast than the number of registered voters have been examined and found to be false. With those facts established, do you still claim the 2020 election was stolen? And if so, can you cite specific verifiable facts? And Jane Timken, starting with you.
There's no doubt in my mind there were irregularities and fraud in the 2020 election. When I was chair of the Ohio Republican Party, I worked with the Trump campaign and recruited over 300 attorneys and poll observers to be on the ground to watch what the Democrats were doing to our election. That's how I delivered Ohio for President Trump. And in fact, I caught a Democrat operative and a congressional candidate pushing ballot harvesting, and I referred that person to the Attorney General. There's nothing more important than election integrity, and as I said, there's lots of people who talk about election integrity. I'm the one that actually did it, and I'm proud that I delivered Ohio for President Trump by more than 8 points. It's because I put in the work to make sure we had a safe and secure election.
Neil Patel, you have 90 seconds.
2020 presidency election, I said it was stolen. I was exactly campaigning for President Trump across Ohio in 2020. And I see actually by 11 p.m. I went to the bed the election night. I thought the president would be winning. Next morning I wake up, everything was changed. I got surprised. And I said, my God. And then we slowly but surely we're finding out, even like Georgia, 100,000, 90,000 people voted, even not even ballot. Some of them totally across the United States, almost, I can say more than 300,000 registered voters, then ballot cast out. That's exactly, I got heartbreaking. I thought, what's going on with this election fraud across the Ohio, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and then Arizona, all the state. I think that was stolen, and that's when I can say that to you. Thank you very much.
Just a reminder, the claim that Mr. Patel has just said has been fact-checked and no evidence has been found to support it. That was a false statement, but we're moving on now to Mike Gibbons.
I was Donald Trump's Ohio finance co-chair in 2016. I supported him throughout both that election and the 2020 election. There are problems with this election. 5 million more people voted than were registered to vote, and that's according to the U.S. Census Bureau. there's a problem. We need to investigate it. The January 6th Commission should be investigating that instead of some false accusation of some kind of insurrection. Recently, there was a Wisconsin special counsel that discovered that a good number of nursing homes in Wisconsin voted at 103% of their occupancy, and they all voted for Joe Biden. We're going to have to investigate these things. But even beyond the numbers, the fact that Hunter Biden's laptop was suppressed for virtually anybody to find out, it's been estimated that 1 out of every 6 voters would have changed their vote if they knew that somehow President Biden was implicated in some of the scandals that are outlined in that laptop. We've got to have fair elections. We need to make it easy to vote and hard to cheat.
And again, the claim that Mr. Gibbons just made about more ballots cast than registered voters has been fact-checked, and no evidence has been found to support it. We're moving on. Josh Mandel.
Not true.
You have 90 seconds, Josh Mandel.
We've been having these debates all over the state. We've had a lot of candidate forums, and repeatedly, over and over and over with all of us on stage, there's only one candidate up here who has the courage to say what I'm about to say. And every time I say it, the liberal media gets triggered. And every time I say it, the squishy rhino Republicans like Mitt Romney and Adam Kinzinger, they get triggered too. But I want to say it very clearly for all the rhinos out there and all the media elites out there. The 2020 election was stolen from Donald J. Trump. It was stolen in a variety of different ways. Ballot harvesting in places like Philadelphia, in places like Pittsburgh, in places like Detroit, Michigan, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm the only candidate on this stage who's taken the time to go out to Maricopa County to see with my own eyes where they were auditing the vote. I'm the only candidate on this stage who's calling for an audit of the vote, not just in Arizona, but in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Georgia, and in every state in the nation. Now listen, a lot of the squishy rhino Republicans, they say, well, you can't audit the states where Trump obviously won. My feeling is, of course you can, because he probably won by a higher margin than was even reported. We cannot move on from the 2020 election. We cannot look forward or move forward until 2020 is fully investigated and everyone who cheated in 2020 is prosecuted.
Again, several claims Mr. Mandel made have been fact-checked with no evidence found to support them. We're moving on now to Mark Bakita. You have 90 seconds.
Can we just stipulate that what I'm going to say is not going to be fact-checked by you?
It's your time.
So I want to correct something. I've been saying that the election was stolen from Donald Trump since 2 or 3 days after the election. It's on video, it's on Rumble, it's on YouTube. I've got the receipts. This is a problem that we've had in America. We've got Hunter Biden's laptop. We've got a made-up dossier that started, believe it or not, in the Ukraine. We've got whistleblowers who made up conversations about Donald Trump with President Zelensky of Ukraine. And the media continues to say that none of that is true, even though the FBI, in the case of Hunter Biden's laptop, says it is. We have a problem. We've got the greatest country in the world. We live in the greatest state in the world, or we wouldn't be here. And we are part of the greatest political party ever invented by man. And all 3 of those have been hijacked by corrupt leadership. I want to go to Washington and eradicate that kind of thinking, personality, and lack of ethics in Washington, D.C.
I guess I don't have to say it since you already said it.
There we go.
Fact checks.
We just saved 15 seconds.
J.D. Vance, 90 seconds.
Well, first, I want to echo something Mark said. So Josh has this talking point that he's the only person who says that the election was stolen from Donald Trump. Well, Mark just said, and I say it all the time, right? I think the election was stolen from Trump, and specifically, Karen, I understand why you got your job and you've got to sort of throw out the fact-check wand and hope that it disappears all the problems that happened in 2020. But let me offer there 3 very specific problems in the 2020 election, and I don't think you'll be able to fact-check them because they're actual facts. 1, Mark Zuckerberg, the founder of Facebook, put $435 million to buy up boards of elections all over the country in big battleground states. Independent studies have shown that the money Zuckerberg spent bought Democrat votes and suppressed Republican votes. Number 1, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has itself, it's a Democrat-leaning Supreme Court, has held that the Pennsylvania election was not conducted in compliance with Pennsylvania's state constitution or state laws. And number 3, they censored, as Mike said, the Hunter Biden laptop story, which again, independent analysts have said cost Donald Trump millions upon millions of votes because the technology companies would not let us talk about the fact that Joe Biden is the leader of the world's biggest crime family. Those are 3 facts that cannot be fact-checked. And this goes back to the point I made about the difference between talking point politicians and substance politicians. If we want to get to the bottom of what happened in 2020, we need to be able to speak about what actually happened and how we're going to get to the bottom of it. First of all, I'm done with an election season in this country, ladies and gentlemen. Let's go back to having an election day. There are a lot of other problems that go from that, but at the end of the day, there were problems in 2020. We can't be afraid to talk about them.
And again, there are a couple statements that have been fact-checked. No evidence found to support them. Let's move on now to Matt Dolan.
Which ones, Karen?
Let's move on to Matt Dolan.
All right, so the lanes are pretty clear here. Let me be very clear. Joe Biden is the legitimate president of the United States. My problem is he's a failed president. And everyone up on this stage wants to go to Washington to look backwards. Well, if you're a family out there fighting inflation, it costs more to put food on your table, it costs more to put gas in your car, that you're worried about your security because we have a party that defunds police, you're worried that our border is wide open and more drugs are coming into this state than ever before. That's what I'm going to Washington to go fight. We need to look forward as Republicans and stop the Biden administration. But then even more so, we need to prepare for the 2024 election and looking forward. And I'm going to go to set an agenda, good conservative policies. Guess what? Some of those policies are the Trump policies that I got done right here in Ohio. If you like less taxes, if you like less regulation, if you like giving parents more ability to choose where their schools go, where their kids can go to school, if you like a government that funds and backs the police, that's what this election is about, looking forward, taking control of Washington, setting an agenda, putting conservative Republican principles in place, and take back this country.
All right, we're now moving on to another issue that several people wanted to hear about, your thoughts on the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have 2 questions here, and the first one will go to Matt Dolan, Mark Bakita, Neil Patel, and Josh Mandel. Recent Economist YouGov polls showed 58% of Americans think it's a good idea to send Ukraine weapons. Nearly 80% say Ukraine is either an ally or a friend of the United States. Under what circumstances would you support military action against Russia or help Ukraine establish a no-fly zone? Mr. Dolan, we're starting with you.
So currently right now there would be, based on the information I have, as a U.S. Senator I'd have more, but currently there is no condition in which I would put America boots on the ground. I think it's essentially important that we give humanitarian aid and we give military aid for the Ukrainians to fight and defend their own freedoms, because it's real. It affects us here in Ohio. It just doesn't affect us because of my friends who I've rallied and prayed with, the Ohio Ukrainians. We have real families over there that are suffering. But it's also our national interest. Talk to any farmer, and they know the Ukrainian conflict is going to cause them additional prices above and beyond Biden's inflation. So it is important that the United States be there. The condition of a no-fly zone, again, I would be working with the generals and the intelligence officers to find out whether we can do that in a manner that does not escalate the problem. We have to be sure that we are very clear that we will defend our allies. We will support Ukraine. But also there's China, and they're watching us. And they're paying attention to whether we're going to show weakness or strength. And I believe that by making sure that the Ukrainian people know that we're going to give them military aid and humanitarian aid, but if China has any thoughts about moving on Taiwan, that there is a difference. We have an obligation with Taiwan, and we'd be there to meet it.
Mark Bakita, you have 90 seconds.
We're being lied to by everybody about Ukraine, including the media. Putin's lying to us, Zelensky's lying to us, the UN's lying to us, our government's lying to us, our community, our intelligence community is lying to us, and the media is lying the most. I am for sending arms to Ukraine, just like other countries, because this is a humanitarian disaster. They need to be taking care of themselves. In no uncertain terms, I would never support a no-fly zone, and here's why. To prosecute a no-fly zone, you've got to take out enemy anti-aircraft. That anti-aircraft equipment sits on Russian soil. We would have to attack a sovereign nation. That would be nuclear suicide. Second, you have to have search and rescue as well as forward air control personnel in the country being covered. So again, that's a non-starter. We need to use this as an example of why Europe needs to stand up and take care of themselves. It's been over 50 years, and they're still sucking off of us to protect them. We've got a bigger threat. We need to be moving our troops from Europe to where proximate to the threat, which is China. China is our biggest enemy. It's not Russia. Russia's a third world country with a barely first world military, and we've just got to get off the China thing that, in fact, the press plays up, continues to play up years after we figured out that dossier was nonsense.
Thank you. Neil Patel, you have 90 seconds.
Okay, on Ukraine, actually, there's no fly zone. Actually, I like that because we don't want to put our boys and girls to Ukraine right now, but we can support as financially or weapons to give it to them. But I don't like to put it our actually boys or girls or kids. All youngsters we are putting over there, all our deployed over there. I'm not agree on that. But whatever way we can support our, Ukraine is not our NATO even, not even allies yet. But I think we try to support them because they are almost getting to the NATO. We want to support them whatever way we can, but I don't like to put actually our boys and girls. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Mandel, you have 90 seconds.
To begin, let's be clear, we should never be putting American boys and girls on the ground over there in this Ukraine-Russia conflict or up in the air. I think it's important to take a step back and remember who Vladimir Putin is. Vladimir Putin was the KGB station chief in East Germany when Ronald Reagan was president. When Reagan brought down that wall, Vladimir Putin was surrounded as the KGB station chief. He burnt the documents in there. He thought it was the end of his life. He called it one of the most embarrassing moments of his life personally and for Mother Russia. And ever since that day, ever since that moment, he has hated Ronald Reagan. He has hated the United States of America. So make no mistake about it. Vladimir Putin is not our friend. That being said, the real threat here is the Chinese Communist Party. On February 4th of this year, right before the Olympics, Putin flew to Beijing. He met with Xi, who's the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, and they put out a joint statement to the world from the Russian Federation and the Chinese Communist Party. And one line in there was addressed to us as the American people, and it said, quote, "The Russian Federation and the Chinese Communist Party are focused on the redistribution of power in the world. Translation, they're focused on the downfall of America and the rise of communist China." That is why we need people in public office in the U.S. House, in the U.S. Senate, in the White House who are strong, who have backbone. Joe Biden is weak. I will be a point of strength, just like Donald Trump.
Now, J.D. Vance, Mike Gibbons, and Jane Timken, you can weigh in on that previous question, but also, still on the issue of Ukraine, Mindy from Cleveland and Diane from Columbus both ask, will you divest yourself or take other actions to distance yourself from any financial involvement with Russia? And J.D. Vance, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I don't have any financial interest in Russia, so I'm not too worried about that. At the end of the day, we should not be doing a no-fly zone. We should not be getting involved in Russia at all. It's not our problem. Doesn't mean you can't accept that there's great tragedy in Ukraine at a personal level. Doesn't mean you can't pray for Ukraine. We certainly have the last few weeks at church. But at the end of the day, it is not our job and it is not our business. Let's remember exactly what happened with Ukraine and compare that to what's happened in our own country. So congressional Republicans and Democrats refused to give Donald Trump $4 billion for a U.S. border wall. over 4 years, while fentanyl, illegal drugs, and tons of other problems poured into this country, killing our citizens. They gave Joe Biden $14 billion for Ukraine in 1 week. That suggests some pretty messed up priorities. Now, let's just also step back and recognize that Hunter Biden is a person who has gotten a ton of business relationships in that area of the world. Can you imagine the media howling if Don Jr. had made hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in Ukraine, and then his father had started a war in that area of the country, or at least had allowed his country to get more and more involved in a war in that area of the country? At the end of the day, we've got tons of problems here. The best thing that we can do to ensure the strength of our country is to focus on our own problems. You have to remember, the same people who want to escalate in Ukraine are the same people who screwed up Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Libya. We should not be giving those people more power at the same time while our own country is suffering.
Mike Gibbons, you have 90 seconds.
I don't think we should put any boots on the ground, any American boots on the ground in the Ukraine. I don't think there should be any American pilots flying over the Ukraine. And I can tell you, I've got a son who is a Navy pilot. And I've got a daughter-in-law who flies at an F-18. I don't want to see them flying over Ukraine. So I'm very much against that. We cannot invoke Article 5, and we have to stay away from a no-fly zone. I also have no investments, personal investments in Russia at all, and I won't have to divest anything.
Jane Timken, 90 seconds.
Yes. As a mother, watching what's happening in Ukraine breaks my heart. Watching Vladimir Putin bomb a maternity ward and children crossing the border all by themselves to escape the ravages of war from the dictator thug Vladimir Putin. And this is all the result of Joe Biden's weakness. His basement diplomacy led to this. Our commander-in-chief is commander of nothing, and his weakness invited this invasion. We need to make sure that we stand strong for America, but we cannot have boots on the ground. We need to make sure that we provide Ukraine with the military equipment they need to defend themselves. It's about our national security. And as for Russia, I don't have any interest in Russia, and the Timken Company, if that's what you're alluding to, has ceased all operations in Russia, just like many American companies. But make no mistake, this is the failure of the Democrats, and Joe Biden and his policies are threatening our national security and the security and safety of the world. As a mom, I'm going to fight for our communities and our safe American first policies.
All right, we're moving on now to immigration, which J.D. Vance just kind of teased for us a little bit here. We received a couple of questions about immigration and about finishing the border wall, all of which you have all talked about it as a core issue at some point. And this question's for J.D. Vance, Josh Mandel, and Neil Patel. David in Union writes, where exactly would the eastern endpoint be and the western endpoint be, and how will that help the immigration problem as you see it? And so I'm going to start with Josh Mandel.
We need to put American citizens first before anyone in any other countries. And when I look at the immigration issue, I think of you and your family at home. I think of your ability to pay for your bills, to put food on the table, to save for your retirement, to save for your kids' education. Every time we allow people from Mexico or Honduras or Guatemala or China or Yemen or Haiti to sneak into our borders in violation of federal law and take your jobs and take the jobs of your kids and your neighbors and your grandkids, we are weakening this country. It's why I have a zero tolerance policy when it comes to illegal immigrants. I think illegal immigrants should be deported, period. Now, there's another issue that underlies all this. As we stand here tonight and you watch at home in your living room, there are over 40,000 U.S. military veterans who are living on the streets, who are living under bridges. But we've got radical policymakers in Washington, Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and others, who are taking your tax money and using it to house illegals while we have veterans living on the street. That is outrageous. As a Marine Corps vet who did my small part, I will do everything I can to fight for our veterans and fight for you as a taxpayer and make sure we put Americans first and deport every single illegal in this country back to where they came from.
J.D. Vance, 90 seconds.
Yeah, so look, the illegal immigration problem is going to break this country if we allow it. It is devastating our economy, it's devastating our hospital and healthcare system, and it's devastating a lot of people here in Ohio who work with, who are affected by the drug problem. I was talking to my mom actually a couple days ago, God love her, and she does, I'm very proud of her, she does work with recovering addicts. And one thing she was telling me is that when they let people go now, when they release people who are in recovery, they say, do not take the stuff that's on the streets now because it will kill you in a way that what was on the streets 10 years ago just won't. Why is that? Why have we let our entire country become a drug and war zone because of the illegal immigration problem in this country? We need to do three very simple and very basic things. The first is we need to finish Trump's border wall. You said the eastern to the western part. Well, the eastern part should be the Gulf of Mexico and the western part should be San Diego. That's the border that we have with Mexico. That's where we have problems, especially in Arizona right now is where we have big problems with border security. Number two, we need to declare the Mexican drug cartels a terrorist organization because that's exactly what they are, and it allows our military to go to Mexico, to go on our southern border and actually do battle with them. And the final thing that we need to do is stop giving welfare to people who come into this country illegally. A lot of the reason why we have nonstop border crossings is because people know we're a generous country. We always should be a generous country, but that generosity should only extend to the people who have followed our laws, not those who have broken them. And if we get those three things under control, we'll finally start to control that southern border and stop losing so many of our people.
Neil Patel, you have 90 seconds.
Okay, immigration, actually, this is my platform. What I say is exactly, when our veterans starving, homeless, and we are giving actually foreign people or that's illegal people come to our nation, and we are giving them just like red carpet. I think, when veterans driving, they actually did service for our nation, our country, and they actually just work very hard and they protect us and our countries. Okay, and we are actually charging. Second thing, we have another we have Medicare. And Medicare exactly like when you get elderly people get 67 age, and when we 67, 65, we are giving the supplemental B for Medicaid, $147. They have to still pay that money, and we are taking care of all the illegal people. We should not take care. I went to border in San Antonio to Rio de Grande River, November 13 to 16. I was over there. And when I see that on the Rio de Grande River on shallow water, a lot of people walking in, and we didn't have enough troops, not even border patrol, nobody over there working. Out of 100 people walk in illegally, there's only 10 people they caught, and that is not right. I think we want to work harder, and we want to make sure, take care of our own people first. That is my, thank you.
All right, staying on immigration here, I want to ask this question to Mike Gibbons, Matt Dolan, Jane Timken, and Mark Paquita. Would such a wall really end the problems with immigration at the U.S.-Mexico border, especially since the existing wall has been breached thousands of times? Mike Gibbons, 90 seconds.
750 million people in the world want to come to this country. It's a number of studies have indicated that. Our president has basically said, come one, come all. We're just seeing the beginnings of it. I think one of the things that has to happen is to finish the wall because they're coming through the cracks. If there were no cracks, they couldn't get through. Once they step on our soil, they're entitled to due process. We've got to change the law. I believe if the president announced, if you come here, you will have no path to citizenship in this country if you came here illegally. That would stop an awful lot of this. We need to finish the wall, we need to secure the border, and we need to enforce the law.
Matt Dolan, 90 seconds.
So first thing I want to address is this is a international crisis, and I'm going to Washington to protect the American people. That is the role of the federal government. So this isn't an either-or situation that has been presented by some of my competitors. Your job is to protect the American people, whether it's one crisis or 10 crises. I'm prepared to do that, and apparently I'm the only one prepared to do that. Look, the border wall has morphed in my mind to three different things. It is, in fact, a physical wall. It is a technological or cyber wall, and it is more border patrol. Now, the border patrol is one thing, but one of the reasons that they're sneaking through the wall now is Joe Biden has completely stripped the border patrol of any authority to act. And so how can we stop people from crossing the border if we just have to escort them over the border into a holding place. So you got to give them teeth to act as border personnel. And the stay in Mexico policy was working. We're trying to find out who is truly seeking asylum and who is not. So I've said before, the tip of this pen, if that was fentanyl, it would kill all of us in this room. This is a real problem that's affecting us here in Ohio. Talk to any law enforcement officer, and they will tell you that 2021 was a record year. Our citizens are dying. We must secure the wall to protect Ohio.
Jane Timken, 90 seconds.
Yes. As I said, there's lots of people who talk about the America First agenda and walls. As Republican Party chair, I was in the trenches fighting for President Trump when he was fighting to build the wall. And by the way, walls work. Nancy Pelosi put a wall around the Capitol to keep people out. Look, this is the result of Biden's failed policies. President Trump was absolutely right when he said it's about our national sovereignty. If you don't have a wall and a border, you don't have a country. And we have seen reports of those on the terrorist watch list coming across the southern border. Huge amounts of fentanyl, heroin, and meth are coming into our communities right here in Ohio. Ohio is a border state because of Biden's failed policies, and I will stand up and fight to protect your families from these failed policies. Those overdoses are killing Ohio citizens and our children. And as a mom, I'm going to fight back. But Biden invited this because when he was running for president, he said he would give health care to illegal immigrants. And by the way, his COVID relief money went to the state of New York, and they gave illegal immigrants $15,000 debit cards. These are the failed policies that are failing Americans. I'm going to fight to stand up to protect America and put American citizens first. It's outrageous to me that COVID lockdowns and mask mandates were enforced on our children so that they had to go to school and wear masks all day long, and COVID policies.
Thank you. Our next question is for J.D. Vance, Mark Makita, and Josh Mandel. Several people wanted to hear about your views on religion and government, especially with the questions about faith that were asked of U.S. Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Did you miss me on that question?
Nearly all of...
Hey, Karen.
Did you miss me on that question?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Mark
Mark Makita, excuse me. Oh, my goodness. Well, now you got a preview of the next question. Go ahead.
They don't want me on the stage at other
90 seconds,
debates.
Mr. Makita.
Bring the fire on immigration.
They don't want me on the stage at other debates. And now they want to skip my questions.
No,
this is
that's
crazy.
my fault.
So let's talk about the wall and breaching the wall. Here's another example of fake news. The wall that Donald Trump was building was virtually unbreachable. The reason there are breaches is because the wall isn't finished. And our Rob Portman was unwilling to sign for the state of emergency declaration to fund that wall. So that's why I want to go replace Rob Portman, because he's doing a poor job for Ohioans. Donald Trump had illegal immigration across the border down to about 16,000 people a month. We're now at over 200. He did it with the Border Patrol, giving them the tools, the support, the technology to do their job. That's what we need to do. Now, everybody on the stage up here except Neil wants to send our military to the border. We don't have to do that. I just proved it to you. Our Border Patrol is good at doing that. Where do we need to send our troops? We need to get them proximate to the biggest threat, which is China. Matt just said it. Where does that fentanyl come from? That fentanyl comes from China. It's coming through the southern border. We've got to take care of, as Matt said, you've got to be able to think and chew gum at the same time, or talk and chew gum at the same time. We've got to deal with the Chinese threat, and we have to deal with the border.
Thank you, and I apologize again for missing you there. So let's move on now. Our next question, as you just heard a little while ago, is for J.D. Vance, Mark Makita, and Josh Mandel. Several people wanted to hear about your views on religion and government, especially with the questions about faith asked of U.S. Supreme Court nominee Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Nearly all of you have talked about your faith. Steve from Blacklick writes, separation of church and state does not exist anywhere in the Constitution. That's what Mr. Mandel has said, he says. And he wants to know how we can trust any of you that you won't violate the Constitution Article 6 prohibition against religious tests for government officials or First Amendment prohibition against government establishing a religion. So, Mr. Vance, we're going to start with you.
Yeah, so first of all, I know the Ohio Debate Commission is committed to fairness in the way that it administers these debates, and I just want to lodge one small complaint for those of you in the audience who may not be able to see that Josh Mandel has been provided 3 water bottles, and I only have 1. So I want to say that if my performance is inadequate, it's because of the hydration policies of the Ohio Debate Commission. But I mean, look, at the end of the day, you know, one of the great Chief Justices in American history, William Rehnquist, once said that if you ban Christianity or any religion entirely from the public square, you don't create a neutral public square, you create one that's devoted to secular humanism. And that's what we've seen in our schools all across the country. We in theory, have separation of church and state. Yet you will hear, even in Ohio schools right now, that there's no difference between men and women, that there are 52 genders, that you can somehow print money to solve the problems that exist in this country. If that's not a religious belief, then the religious beliefs don't actually exist. That is fundamentally the problem. I really believe, as a person who was raised Christian, stepped away from my faith and came back to it, that the faith of our people is actually an incredible reservoir of strength. We shouldn't hide from it. We shouldn't banish it to some corner of our society. We should accept that people's belief in God is good. It is a reasonable thing, and we shouldn't try to force them to hide from it in the way they do their public duties or in the way they conduct their lives.
Mark Pakita, 90 seconds.
Thank you. The Founding Fathers, if you read especially the Federalist Papers and then the communication between them as they were forming the country, they talk about the fact that we need to have a Judeo-Christian foundation in our country for it to work. For our constitutional representative republic to work, there's nothing in the Constitution that talks about morals or ethics or character or honesty. It's all about protecting God-given rights, natural rights that flow from God to man, that are protected by the Constitution, not given to us by the Constitution, not given to us by government, not given to us by man or woman, but given to us by God. If you can't talk about God, then you can't talk about our country, our form of government. They said it was a requirement to have those lines on the road to keep us on the highway in terms of managing this great experiment. On top of that, they often talked to each other about how thankful they were and how important it was to have good wives and strong families, along with a faith commitment as well as community organizations. These are all the things the left wants to blow up on us. We need to put them back together, and we need to be proud about it.
Josh Mandel, you have 90 seconds.
Let me start off by applauding Mark and applauding JD. I think both of them were very eloquent in their answer on this question, and I echo everything that Mark had to say and everything JD had to say as well. Our nation, our republic, was founded on a bedrock of Judeo-Christian values. Not Muslim values, not atheism, but Judeo-Christian values. And there's so many factors that separate that Judeo-Christian ethic from other belief sets. But one of the main differentiating factors is our acknowledgement of good versus evil and our willingness to fight. And when I say our, mine, yours watching at home, everyone in this auditorium tonight, our willingness to fight for good over evil. And ladies and gents, there's a lot of evil out there right now. Yes, in the world, but in this country right now. Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, the liberal media, the secular left, they're trying to take God out of all aspects of society. We got to be going the other direction. Rather than watering down on that Judeo-Christian bedrock, we should be doubling down. We should be instilling faith in the classroom, in the workplace, and everywhere in society. We are a country, we are a nation, we are a republic that grew strong based on a freedom of religion, not a freedom from religion, and we need to embrace that Judeo-Christian foundation of America.
Thank you. Let's move on now to a question based on news that's been coming out for the last few days. We'll ask this one of Matt Dolan, Mike Gibbons, Jane Timken, and Neil Patel. The Washington Post and CBS News have reported that Ginny Thomas, the wife of U.S. Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, exchanged more than 24 text messages with Mark Meadows, then President Trump's chief of staff, about overturning the result of the 2020 election. Given this information, should Justice Thomas recuse himself from cases about January 6th or the 2020 election? And would you feel the same way if the political parties in the situation were switched? Matt Dolan, 90 seconds.
Sure. Well, I haven't seen any of the emails, so I don't. I know what the Washington Post and others are purporting that they say, but I haven't seen them. So that's a decision that the litigants and the Supreme Court justice are going to have to make. But let's look at January 6th, because there's a distinction between me and everybody here up on the stage. You know, we all claim we're constitutional conservatives. We also, I'm sure, are all in agreement that when President Biden went down to Atlanta and essentially said to the country, I'm going to divide you by our voting rights, he said, look, we're going to tell Ohio that if you want to purge your rolls, you can't do it. If you want voter ID, you can't do it. If you want to stop ballot harvesting, you can't do it. He wanted to federalize the election. And I know everyone here, I know most of you watching, I know everyone on the stage is totally against that. But let's look back to January 6th. You know, I'm running for the U.S. Senate. I'm going to be a member of the federal government. If any of these other folks win, they're going to be a member of the federal government. They are now running to go to Washington to say they're going to go and decertify the 2020 election, overturn the 2020 election. That is in direct violation of the Constitution that we just heard so eloquently described by people earlier. The time, place, and manner is left to the states to determine who's going to represent them and go to Washington. If you want to have election integrity, which I do, I am blessed that I live in Ohio. If you want to go to Washington, don't federalize the elections.
Thank you. Mike Gibbons, 90 seconds.
I don't think there's any evidence whatsoever that Ginny Thomas was talking to her husband about the election. She stated many times in the past, long before the election, that they don't talk about each other's business. I don't think there's any reason for him to step down or to recuse himself in any way because of that. I don't think questioning and trying to find a legal way of overturning the election is in any way treasonous or even slightly illegal. I think every time a lawyer goes into their office every day, they're trying to figure out how to do something legally. If there was a reason to overturn it, if the evidence was there, I've got to believe that if it was discovered that this was a faulty election, if there was evidence sitting there that apparently the courts refused to even investigate, I believe that there would have been some recourse and some possibility of overturning that. If they didn't have that legal means of doing it, they wouldn't have done it. The idea that Donald Trump foisted some fraud on our country because he didn't actually believe that this election was stolen and therefore committed fraud is ridiculous. And they're going to have a very difficult time proving that. That seems to be the route they're going right now. So no, I don't think that Justice Thomas should back off at all on any decisions relating to the January 6th case.
Jane Timken, 90 seconds.
Justice Clarence Thomas should not recuse himself. This is an example of the Democrats putting pressure on a sitting Supreme Court justice. His wife had separate opinions than Judge Clarence Thomas. He is able to do his job and adjudicate the cases before him, and it's up to Clarence Thomas to decide whether to recuse himself or not. Look, we saw and witnessed a Supreme Court nominee by Joe Biden unable to answer the question as to how to define a woman. It, to me, shows that she's so beholden to the woke left that she won't even answer this question. And again, this is an example of the left's attempt to erase women and allow for transgendered men to compete against women in sports. I'm going to speak out against this. As a woman and a mom of a daughter and a former college athlete, we need to stand up for women and fight for women's rights. This is an example of the Democrats attacking a Supreme Court justice, and we know why. They want to control the court. And I stood with President Trump when he appointed constitutionalists, pro-life judges to the Supreme Court, like Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Barrett, because they'll stand up for our America First policies, just like I will stand up for your America First.
Neil Patel, you have 90 seconds.
About the Clarence Thomas, see, whatever he's doing, actually presidents should let him do that. Because January 6th, whatever they're talking about it, think it's not going to be changed anymore now, president. Because you already, January 6th, when we pass, it's not going to be changed. President is still going to be there next for 2 more years, even whatever they left. Okay? That's why actually, whatever actually he decide, and Clarence Thomas, they should put him on and just let him decide that. Okay? And I want to just say something else about it. When Clarence Thomas appointed by President Clinton in 92 or 93, around that area, and President Clinton appointed him, I think he's doing so far awesome job. And I don't want to say anything more, but thank you very much.
I don't think Clarence Thomas was appointed by President Clinton, but
was he appointed by President? No?
Well, let's move on.
Okay.
I don't want to take time away from you folks here. Most of you have campaigned with or touted endorsements from high-profile Republicans, and we got several questions related to these, and so I'm going to be asking specific candidates about this. We'll start with Jane Timken. While you have the endorsement of Senator Rob Portman, you also have hired Corey Lewandowski as an advisor. Heather from Hudson writes that you did this, quote, despite the fact that he has a history of assault and is presently facing accusations of sexual harassment from a past donor of President Trump. Can you please address why, in light of these circumstances, that Mr. Lewandowski is an advisor position on your campaign?
Yes. Well, as you know, I have the endorsement of Senator Rob Portman, and I'm the only candidate on this stage that President Trump has endorsed when I became chair of the Ohio Republican Party. Look, there's a lot of candidates who talk about being America First and fighting for President Trump. I'm the one that actually did it. As I said, there's lots of show horses. I'm the workhorse. And Corey Lewandowski knows that I've been in the trenches fighting for the America First policies, defending President Trump and his agenda, because they were working for Ohio families when we had a booming economy, record low unemployment, a secure border, and energy independence. Those are the things that I've been fighting for. And I put 150,000 miles in my car traveling around Ohio, talking to Ohio's families, businesses, farmers, because those policies were working. I saw a lot of things when I was traveling Ohio on those bus tours, recruiting campaign workers, standing up and defending President Trump. I did not see Josh Mandel, J.D. Vance, or Mike Gibbons.
Mr. Mandel, you have touted the endorsement of U.S. Representative Madison Cawthorn, who has called the president of Ukraine a thug, and General Michael Flynn, who has promoted various conspiracy theories, including that COVID is being used by elites to control the world. Why would you promote endorsements from Cawthorn and Flynn?
Well, first of all, let me start off by saying I think the question you asked Jane is unfair. I've known Corey Lewandowski for a long time, and I think he was a force for good in electing President Trump. He had the guts to be out there when so many other people in our party wouldn't, and he was really at the pointed tip of the spear in helping to elect President Trump. And so I just want to defend Jane on that and say I think that was a very unfair question. And Corey Lewandowski chose to endorse Jane, but that doesn't make him a bad person. And whatever he's dealing.
Because he knows I'm the best candidate, Josh.
Yeah. Long story short, he was there at the beginning for President Trump. Now listen, I'm proud to have the endorsement of General Flynn. I'm proud to have the endorsement of Madison as well. General Flynn is the people's general. Besides for Donald Trump, there is no one that the radical left, that the liberal media, that the fake news, that the squishy establishment Republicans went after with more force than General Michael Flynn. I am proud to have his endorsement. I am hopeful that he'll come here to Ohio to campaign for me. And I think we need more General Flynns leading our country. And the same thing with Madison. We may not agree on all of the issues, but in the totality of the America First movement of putting you as American citizens, we the people first, heck yeah, I'm proud to have his endorsement.
Mr. Vance, you've touted the endorsement of Georgia U.S. Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, who spoke at a white nationalist conference recently, has repeated claims from the Kremlin that there are Nazis in Ukraine, and has said she agrees that the president of Ukraine is a thug and corrupt. Why would you promote an endorsement from Taylor Greene?
Well, look, I mean, first of all, Marjorie endorsed me. She's a friend of mine. She's a patriot. And I also think it's funny because all these guys, their negative attack ads against me say that I don't like Donald Trump. And, of course, I did say some negative things about Donald Trump 6 years ago. But if I was anti-Trump, then his strongest advocate in Congress would not be behind me, and I'm proud to have her support. You know, this highlights something, Karen, that I really don't like that the media does, and they do it to Republicans. Of course, they never do it to Democrats, which is they play this guilt by association game where they get us to stab our friends in the back, and then we wonder why the left always wins, even though we sometimes win elections because we're constantly stabbing our friends in the back. The accusation against Marjorie is pretty simple, that she appeared at a conference where somebody said something bad. And I asked, did she say something bad at the conference? I actually watched her remarks. I agreed with nearly every word that she said. I hate this about politics. I was raised by my mamaw. She's a great woman. She's from southeastern Kentucky. She called us hillbillies growing up. And she told us that the thing that mattered more than anything, was loyalty. There's no business in the world that asks you to stab your friends in the back like politics. I absolutely refuse to do it to Marjorie Taylor Greene. She is my friend, and she did nothing wrong. She said nothing wrong, and I'm absolutely not going to throw her under the bus or anybody else who's a friend of mine.
Mr. Gibbons, as you mentioned at the outset, you've touted the endorsement of U.S. Senator Rand Paul, who's called Dr. Anthony Fauci a menace and opposed humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Why would you promote an endorsement from Paul?
Well, first of all, I've gotten to know Rand Paul very well over the last few years, and I'm not sure whether a lot of these endorsers get to know people that they endorse. But Rand Paul and I agree on pretty much everything. Not everything, but pretty much everything. You know, this country's broke, and he seems to be the only one that wants to talk about it. We have inflation that's raging. He's the only one that seems to have any answers about how to fix that. Now, I studied economics in undergrad. I studied economics in graduate school. I taught economics at the graduate school level. Wouldn't it be great to send a senator to Washington that actually understands how our economy works? Rand Paul is one of the more popular Republican senators, certainly. But what he said about Dr. Fauci is absolutely true. Dr. Fauci lied to Congress. Dr. Fauci...
Let's let Mr. Gibbons finish,
Dr.
please.
Fauci should be fired and probably prosecuted. And I think it's time that we get somebody going to Washington that will fight with Rand Paul, and that's what I am, a fighter. And I will go to Washington, and we'll get those kinds of things done.
All right, well, right now, we're more than halfway through. We're going to take a brief pause to allow our broadcast partners to resume regularly scheduled programming if they're going to. We have about a half an hour remaining. You can continue to watch online at the OhioDebateCommission.org and on our YouTube channel. This is Voters First, the 2022 Ohio U.S. Senate Republican primary debate, coming to you live from the Paul Robeson Cultural and Performing Arts Center on the campus of Central State University in Wilberforce, Ohio, presented by the Ohio Debate Commission. All right, we are back now to continue on our debate, and we have a question coming up here from Gary in Dayton, and I want to ask this question of all of you. You'll all have 90 seconds to take on this question here. He wants to know if you agree with Senator Rick Scott's plan to rebuild America, and if you would support Mitch McConnell for Majority Leader. Yes or no for both, and why? And we're going to start with Mike Gibbons.
You know, I believe that the Republican Party has to define itself, and they haven't done a very good job. We've got Republicans all over the ideological map. This was a great first draft on trying to set some of the things that we all believe in, and the people that don't believe them probably shouldn't be Republicans. There's some things I disagree with in there, and I think those things can change, but we need to determine what this party is all about. And what was the second part of the question?
Senator Rick Scott's plan to rebuild America and Mitch McConnell for Majority Leader.
Oh, yes. Well, I don't know who's running for Majority Leader, and I assume it will be Majority Leader. And I'll determine that when I get there. But I can tell you, you already know Rand Paul endorsed me. There's 2 senators from Kentucky. Mitch McConnell didn't.
All right. J.D. Vance, you have 90 seconds. I'm sorry. Yeah, J.D. Vance, you have 90 seconds.
Okay. Yeah, so, you know, Rick Scott's plan for America, I've read it, I looked at it. I don't agree with everything. In particular, he's advocated for middle-class tax increases. I think that's a joke for the Republican Party. Why would we increase the taxes on the middle class, especially when Apple, Google, Amazon, and Facebook pay a lower tax rate than any middle-class American in this room or in this country? It's ridiculous. But there are a lot of good things in it. And most importantly, I like that Rick Scott actually proposed a set of ideas for what to do. I'm so sick of Republicans who say, well, we're just going to push back against the Biden agenda. Well, of course we're going to do that. But what are we going to actually do for our voters? What are we going to do for the American people? There are a lot of problems out there, a lot of very serious problems, and we can't just sort of stick our flag in the mud and say we're against. We've got to be for stuff. We're for middle-class people being able to raise a family and do it on a single income. We're for the reindustrialization of this country, so we make more stuff in America. We build our own things. We don't have to rely on the communist Chinese to make our pharmaceutical products. We bring our fertilizer manufacturing back so the Russians can't cut off 10% of our fertilizer. There are things that we stand for in this Republican Party. We stand for parents being able to set a course for their children. We stand for the ability of communities to be able to build a good life for themselves without federal overreach. There are a lot of good things, a lot of good ideas out there in the conservative movement. We can't just run away from everything that's bad. We've actually got to run towards something that's going to get something done for our voters. So I agree with the idea that we need to put forward a positive agenda.
Matt Dolan, those two questions.
Well, it sounds like Mike Gibbons and J.D. Vance should have raised their hands last week when they didn't want to move on from 2020. So, of course, Rick Scott, Senator Scott, thank you, because it's exactly what I'm talking about. We need to establish an agenda for Republicans as to what we're going to go to Washington and debate for the American people. So, as all of them said, taxes, security, border, manufacturing, schools, these are all issues that we need to have legitimate, open, transparent discussions about. Just like, remember, go back to 1994. Newt Gingrich brought a contract for America. And what that was able to do is say, hey, America, you elect Republicans, this is what we're going to do for you. This is what we're going to debate and engage and have discussion on. And I'm going to come back to Ohio and say, this is what we're working on for you. So absolutely, we have to look forward. We have to stop the Biden administration, and we can do that in the majority by making certain that we block any efforts to all this unnecessary spending. We secure the border, but we're going to do it in the majority. And for me, it's about Ohio. So I don't know who's running, but I'm going to tell you this. Whether it's he or she, him or her, I'm going to look him in the eye and say, I am about Ohio. And that's where I'm going to focus on. When I think it's good for Ohio, when I think it's good for America, I'll vote for it. I'm not voting for political purposes.
And again, the question, Senator Rick Scott's plan to rebuild America, and if you would support Mitch McConnell for Majority Leader Jane Timken. You have 90 seconds.
Yes. Absolutely, I would not support Rick Scott's agenda, especially because it raises taxes on the middle class. My agenda is the America First agenda, and as I said, I'm a mom on a mission to take our country back. And those America First policies and the ones that I will fight for your families, are the ones that I've been in the trenches fighting for. And that was border security and American jobs, and the forgotten man and woman. Under President Trump's leadership, we had a booming economy and record low unemployment. Those are the things that I'm going to fight for. We need to have safe and secure communities, and that's standing up and defending the police and building the wall. Those are the things that will make your American dream and your job opportunities for your children and grandchildren be there so that we can continue to be the greatest country in the face of this earth. The Democrats are threatening the future of our country, and I'm going to fight to make sure that we still have our country. There can be no longer the issue that the Democrats are going to take our country and turn it into a ditch. I'm going to fight to make sure they're not indoctrinating our children, and make sure that you have the security and future for your children and grandchildren. As for the next majority leader, I'm going to stand up and vote for someone who I believe will fight for America. And we need leaders who are going to have a backbone that put Ohio and America first. That will be my test as to who is the best leader, and no more playing Lucy with the football because the Democrats do that constantly.
Thank you. Josh Mandel, 90 seconds.
I think JD made a great point in the previous question about how the liberal media like yourself, Karen, and others, the fake news, they push out these trap questions to try to trick and trap Republicans. They would never ask questions like this to Democrats. I guarantee you at the debate earlier today, the Democrat debate, they didn't ask questions like this. And the reality is, we as conservatives, all of us on this stage, it's us versus them. It is us versus the fake news. It is us versus the liberals. And we shouldn't even play that game when they try to create hypothetical elections for majority leader a year from now, and they don't even tell you who's running. Listen, regarding the agenda you're referencing, I haven't read it, but I'll tell you my agenda. First, bring down gas prices for everyone sitting at home watching. Biden, by shutting down the XL pipeline, by stopping oil and gas drilling in America, by having us rely on Russia and China and Iran. That's nuts. We should be drilling for oil and gas in America to bring down the price at the pump for our families. Stop the reckless spending in Washington. When I was state treasurer, I took the entire state of Ohio's checkbook. I put it online. I said the taxpayers have a right to know how the tax money is being spent. And by doing that, we brought transparency and we cut the state budget. I'm going to do the same thing in Washington. Bring transparency, cut the federal budget. If we can wind down that spending, we can reverse inflation, and the cost of buying a gallon of milk or a loaf of bread or meat at the grocery store, it won't cost as much. And so those are the kind of things on my agenda. Those are the things I'll be focusing on. And I want to focus on things that impact your life and your family, not these esoteric, hypothetical questions that the fake news makes up to try to trap Republicans.
Thank you. Neil Patel, you have 90 seconds.
We want to make sure, actually, tax cut, put it on with investment and foreign investment as well as from our state. Bring it from outside. And we do the tax cut. When we got the revenue increase, tax cut should be okay because we got the revenue coming up. Same time, we want to do the security. We want to make sure we have extraordinary security for our state and country. Okay? And talking about we want to make the small government. We want to make the more jobs in our state and country. And everybody's talking about fighting, war. We are not fighting when we go to Washington, D.C. We're going to actually negotiate. I'm going to be a negotiator. We want to negotiate with other senators. We don't want to fight and do the fighting like a war. We are going to the war in Ukraine or something like that. That's what actually I believe in. We want to negotiate a better job, better economy, better tax cut and everything. Thank you.
Mark Bakita, 90 seconds.
Thank you. Rick Scott's plan is essentially a plan to protect billionaires and soak the middle class with tax raises. And there are people on this stage who have talked about the middle class not paying their fair share. How about we stop talking about tax policy and we talk about cutting spending? In fact, what I'd like to do is talk about cutting spending 10 to 100 times more than we talk about tax policy. We take a little here and a little there. We argue about 1% here and 1% there. And we allow at the same time profligate spending that's got our deficit well over $30 trillion today. We have mortgaged the future. And so what does the current administration want to do? They want to monetize that debt. They're printing money like Venezuela, which is why we have the inflation we do. How does that help them? They are printing money to pay off our debt that's worth less. But the bad thing for American families is that lowers the value of your 401k because those dollars aren't inflating. In fact, they're going away. That will make you more dependent on the government. That's what they want. We've got to stop plans like Rick Scott's. In terms of Mitch, I've said this a long time ago on national radio with John Fredericks. I would not vote for him if I was 1 out of 100. He's corrupt. He's got ties to China. He needs to go, and I would not vote for him.
Thank you. I want to go back to a question about endorsements that we had just before we took that little break. This question is for Matt Dolan, Neil Patel, and Mark Bakita. It's clear several candidates on the stage are hoping for President Trump's endorsement, but he hasn't weighed in on this race other than to say that he would not endorse Mr. Dolan because of the name change related to the Cleveland Guardians. Can you win this race without Trump's endorsement? And I'm going to start with you, Mr. Dolan.
Absolutely. I'm going to win the race. And I don't know, maybe he will endorse me, because when he takes the time to look at all of us up on this stage and see who's actually implemented the conservative Republican ideas that he brought to Washington I've done it in Ohio. Look, I've been honored by Republican leadership to be in charge of 3 straight state budgets. All of those budgets have been balanced, which means we are not spending more than we are bringing in from taxpayers. Yet each one of those budgets gave significant tax cuts to everyone in the state of Ohio. And we also cut. We cut the EPA, we cut the Ohio Jobs and Family Services, we cut the Department of Administrative Services, because you understand that there's efficiency and effectiveness in government. And that's what we dug into, and that's what I was able to accomplish. But if you look at the police, we funded them. If you look at regulations, in Ohio, we were the first ones to bring, the 6th state to bring in Trump's 2-for-1 regulation relief. So we're not strangling Ohio businesses. So when you look to what this election's about, it's about you, Ohio. And I'm the only one that's fighting for you. There are people up on the stage who are literally fighting for 1 vote, and that person doesn't even vote in Ohio. And that concern for that 1 vote doesn't end on Election Day. My responsibility is to be the senator from Ohio for Ohio. And I know that when I go there, I have the right experience, I have the conservative results that will return Ohio to what we were like under the Trump administration.
Thank you. Neil Patel, 90 seconds.
President Trump, I don't think so he's going to endorse anyone. And I don't think so I'm going to get even endorsement from him as well. Okay? And President Trump, I like him. His policy is very good because his First America policy. And President Trump actually endorse anyone, they're going to get stronger support. But I think Matt Dolan says that he don't have any vote in Ohio. But he got a lot of influence in Ohio. As Neil Patel, I don't think so I'm going to get endorsement, but we're going to win this election. I can say that we're going to win this election. I promise you, when we go to the Washington, D.C., we're going to make sure every conservative, we work with that, everybody, and we want to make sure I can negotiate as a negotiator with the other side in Senate. That's why I'm going to say that. Thank you very much.
Mark Bakita, 90 seconds.
I think endorsements are ridiculous. Think about it. Someone goes and gets someone to tell you who to vote for. And most of the time they're out of state. What do they know about Ohio politics and Ohio problems? I say if you don't have policy, you go get endorsements. I've got a 21-point policy plan. It's been documented since October of 2021. You can go to my website, markthe4ohio.com/policy, and you can see it. Nobody else up here has anything like that. That is my commitment to you. That's how I will think, negotiate, vote, and legislate. And if I don't, you're allowed to come and bring one of our nifty wooden bats, find me, and beat me about the head and neck with it. It's very, very simple stuff. Take a look at it. But it's not easy to implement because not only do we fight socialist Democrats and deep state and big tech, we're fighting our own party who are abjectly corrupt, especially here in Ohio. Now, I want to talk about Matt's claims. He says, I balanced the budget. Well, that has to be done by law in Ohio. And he talks about protecting conservative values. He voted against Stand Your Ground in the heartbeat bill. How the heck is that conservative?
You have an opportunity for rebuttal there, Mr. Dolan.
So the
30
last
seconds.
budget, the Ohio Republican Party called it the most conservative budget in Ohio history because we did cut your taxes. But Mark, what do you want to cut? Do you want to cut the money that we gave to the Crisis Pregnancy Center? Do you want to cut the money that we gave to the police? Do you like the idea that parents have the ability to choose for themselves what schools they want to go to? Do you want to cut that money? You know, because Ohio has a law that says you have to balance your budget, it just doesn't happen. You got to make difficult decisions, and you make strategic cuts, you make strategic investments to make Ohio stronger.
Thank you.
I'd save $4 billion by not paying Intel to come here I could get reelected
we have to move on.
as the governor.
We're running short of time. I have one final question for all of you. You get 30 seconds to answer this. There's been some criticism about this race as being a slugfest and all sorts of other things that have been said about some of the things that have happened amongst you and some of your ads. I want to go down the line in just 30 seconds. Do you think that the tone of this race really is an indicator of the kind of dignity and decorum that voters expect from a U.S. Senator? Starting with you, Mr. Vance.
Look, I think if you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. At the end of the day, politics is a rough and tumble business. I think some of the accusations have been ridiculous. These people know that I supported Trump in 2020. They know that Don Jr., the president's son, has come out and said that their attacks on me are ridiculous, and he said I'm 100% America first. So, yeah, I think some of the attacks are ridiculous. But, look, that's the nature of politics, and if you can't take attacks from other people, push back on them and actually stand your ground, you're sure as heck not going to stand up to Chuck Schumer when you get to Washington, D.C. Mike
Gibbons, 30 seconds.
Well, I want to point out to you it did not become a slugfest. There were no punches thrown.
Rhetorical, maybe.
You know, I found myself in first place in the polls, and there's some people up on stage here that have never been in second place in the polls. I understand that. You know, you're gonna attack. I'm used to it by now. I've been beaten up pretty much every day of the last 3 or 4 weeks.
We got to move on. Sorry. Jane Timken.
We all know, we watched the Freedom Works debate where Mike Gibbons and Josh Mandel displayed childish behavior. That's not unacceptable in a U.S. Senate race. Look, as I said, there's a lot of show horses. They're all talk. They talk about now J.D. Vance supports President Trump. But if he had his way, Hillary Clinton would have been president in 2016. I'm the candidate with the grit and grace to get things done. We need someone who is going to roll up their sleeves and work for Ohio and the American people.
Thank you. Josh Mandel, 30 seconds.
I'm a fighter, and I'm never going to apologize for being a fighter. When I go to Washington, I will be unafraid. I'll be unafraid to take on Schumer, Pelosi, and Biden, but at the same time, I'll be unafraid to take on the Republican Party bosses. And for me, it's not just talk. I've actually done it. In Columbus, when Rhino John Kasich was trying to do Obamacare Medicaid expansion, was trying to do Common Core, I led the charge to take on John Kasich. I will do the same thing in Washington against these weak Republicans there as well.
Thank you. Mark Bakita, 30 seconds.
Dignity, decorum, that's the last thing we need right now. We got to fix problems. I want to save this country for my grandchildren and your children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. This is astounding to me. We have people here up on the stage who have showed us exactly who they are. And they're going to put on their costume and their makeup and campaign. They're going to get to Washington potentially, and they're going to get there and they're going to screw us like usual. And we're going to say, wow, how did that happen? We can't, we've got to have a zero tolerance policy.
Thank you. Matt Dolan.
So the difference between campaigning and actually engaging in public policy, this is a campaign. This is theater. These are people acting to be able to get one person's endorsement. I'm the only one on this stage who has gone and produced results. You know what, though, folks? You don't have to do it by destroying the other side's character. You can be strong and tough, and I have been. In fact, you know, I've been 32 years a lawyer. In one of my first cases, after the end of it, the opposing counsel came up to me after I won it and said, Matt, you are the nicest, meanest guy I've ever dealt with.
Thank you.
It can be done.
Thank you. Neil Patel, 30 seconds.
I'm the only candidate get endorsement from Almighty God. That is the best endorsement I got. And I can say that I'm the only candidate visited more than all 88 counties more than twice. And I'm the only candidate have petition signatures submitted by me, circulated by me and Almighty God together, more than 2,500 signatures. And each and every county is covered. Okay? And that's made it. Thank you.
Thank you. You'll all be relieved to know that concludes the questioning portion of the debate. We have a few minutes now left for closing remarks, and each candidate will have 1 minute, and we're going to start with the same order we began with. So, Jane Timken, the floor is yours, 60 seconds.
Good evening. Thank you to the Ohio Debate Commission. As I said, I'm a mom on a mission to take our country back. This fight is about our American dream. My grandparents came to this country with little to no education. My grandfather worked in a rubber factory and my grandmother worked as a maid. It's because of their values and their hard work I was able to live the American dream. But the Democrats are threatening the future of our country, and I'm going to fight to protect your children and grandchildren so they have the American dream. I've been in the trenches fighting for the America First policies, which were energy independence, border security, and American jobs, because they were working for Ohio's families. I will always be putting Ohio first, and I will always stand up for our God-given constitutional rights, our First Amendment freedom of religion, our First Amendment freedom of speech. I will always stand up for life and protect the unborn. I'm in this fight for you. I hope you join me. I'm Jane Timken, and I will always put Ohio first.
Neil Patel, 60 seconds for your closing remarks.
I'm Neil Patel. I'm asking you for your May 3rd election vote for U.S. Senate. I hope my life motto is faith, freedom, and service. Faith in God, freedom, service. And I'd like to work with and negotiate solution with the ambassador, the trade ministers, U.S. government officials. I have worked with multiple international companies to get the job done and create a job for Ohio and West Virginia. I'm involved in Sister City International and other organizations too. I'm a small businessman. I created over 1,000 jobs in Ohio, and I'm a common man with a common sense, working with everybody. I employed over 1,000 employees. Now I want to serve our state and our country. God bless you all. God bless America.
Mike Gibbons, 60 seconds for your closing remarks.
I'm Mike Gibbons, and I'm a businessman, not a politician. I'm a constitutional conservative without apology. I believe 2022 is going to be one of the most important elections in our lifetime. And I don't believe that we can entrust our nation's future to career politicians, party insiders, or people that put their finger in the air when they want to find out what they're going to say next. I believe in America and the America First agenda. I believe in the sanctity of human life and the right to keep and bear arms. I back the blue, and I believe in law and order. I believe a nation without borders is no nation at all. I believe in peace through strength. I believe in liberty, personal responsibility, and in America still the land of hope. I believe America is the greatest country in the history of the world. And I believe, most importantly, that I believe our rights come from Almighty God and not from government. I'm Mike Gibbons, and I'm running for the U.S. Senate.
Josh Mandel, 1 minute, 60 seconds for your closing remarks.
Usually in these closing remarks, they want you to give a summary of all your positions, but this debate and these questions by the moderator and the fake news, it's a great illustration of how out of touch the media is with conservatives and the Trump America First base. Not one question about protecting life, not one question about protecting the Second Amendment. So let me talk about how passionate I am on those two issues. We must do everything we can to protect life, from conception to natural death. I will do everything I can in the U.S. Senate to stop abortion. I was the first statewide official in Ohio to have the courage to be for the heartbeat bill. I took on John Kasich. I took on the squishy rhino Republicans in Columbus. I led the charge to protect the unborn. When it comes to our gun rights, our Second Amendment rights, our right to bear arms, those rights come from God, not from government. And I believe very strongly and fiercely, as a Marine, as a father, as a taxpayer, as an American, that the Second Amendment to the Constitution helps us protect the rest of our rights.
Mark Bakita. You'll have a chance in just a minute to applaud. We're almost done. Mark Bakita, 60 seconds for your closing remarks.
I'm Mark Bakita, and I want to be your next U.S. Senator. I think we need to send a fighter to Washington, D.C., and I'm that fighter. I am the only candidate up here who can say that I got in the race before Rob Portman dropped out. I'm the only candidate who registered in October of 2019 with the Federal Election Commission to take on a sitting U.S. Senator with Rob Portman's money and clout. Everybody else got in after that. As a voter, which I am, but you are as well, I would ask you to ask yourself two questions about them. One, did they think Rob Portman was doing a good job? I did not. That's why I'm running. If they did, I would think that you wouldn't want to vote for them. If they didn't think he was doing a good job, then that triggers the second question. Why did you wait until he dropped out to run? The only answer to that question I could find is that they were afraid of him. They were afraid of his clout and his money. That's not me. If you want a fighter, send me. If you want Rob Portman 2.0, send them.
J.D. Vance, 60 seconds for your closing remarks.
Yeah, look, I know that I was asked about Marjorie Taylor Greene and Rick Scott, but I wasn't asked about abortion, the life of the unborn. I wasn't asked about the Second Amendment. I also wasn't asked about the big technology firms. And those firms are controlling what we can say and even what we can think in this country. Look, we're in a moment where we need to be able to speak the truth. We need leaders who are unafraid of being called names by the mainstream media and are going to speak honestly about the truth. We just saw a biological male win a women's swimming competition. And what bothers me about that situation is the fact that you got pharmaceutical companies getting rich off of it, ideological leaders in colleges pushing this stuff nonstop, and also big technology companies who will censor you and silence you for even speaking honestly about it. Go home, Google. Can a man become pregnant? Google will tell you, and tell your children, more importantly. The first answer is yes. We have got to get back to basic common sense. All the problems that we're talking about and all the problems that we care about are not going to be solved if we keep sending people who won't even speak the truth about fundamental issues.
Matt, wait, almost done, almost done. Matt Dolan, 60 seconds for your closing remarks.
So I'm going to end where I began. I know who and what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for Ohio. You know, there was a bill that improved Ohio's economy. It was going to create tens of thousands of jobs. But Donald Trump told everyone in Ohio, if you're a candidate and you support this bill, I won't endorse you. But Cincinnati, I got your back because I know how important the Brent Spence Bridge is to our economy. And yeah, I've been stuck in that traffic as well. Ashtabula, Lake, Cleveland, Lorain, Toledo, I got your back. I know how important that port is to be able to get goods and services to and from the international ports, to be able to get our rails and our trucks out so that we can be a strong economy. Dayton, I got your back. I know how important Right Pat is to your economy here and how important it is to make sure that we provide skilled workers and have the transportation to get you there. Folks, this race is about Ohio, and I have never wavered. My first and only mission is to make sure Ohio and America are strong.
Thank you. That concludes the Republican U.S. Senate debate. I'd like to thank all of our candidates, J.D. Vance, Mike Gibbons, Jane Timken, Josh Mandel, Mark Bukita, Matt Dolan, and Neil Patel for joining us. The first time all 7 candidates have been on the debate stage. Please go ahead and applaud now. You're free to do it.
They just wrapped up there in Wilberforce, and Colleen Marshall is joining me now. We're going to have a discussion just like we had after the Democrats took the stage this afternoon. Obviously, a lot larger stage, all 7 of them on the stage this time. First time we heard from 2 of these candidates, Colleen, and what stood out to me is before we started talking, striking a lot of similar answers from last week.
Well, of course, as you said, the first time we heard from Bukita and Patel, they were not on stage for our Next Star debate. We had qualification. You had to reach a certain percentage of votes. You had to have a certain amount of money in your coffers, and they did not qualify. The debate commission had everybody come on the stage who made it to the ballot, who qualified for the ballot, and that's why you heard from those 2 candidates tonight. But for the other 5 who were on the stage with us last week in Cleveland, you are right. They are sticking pretty closely to their campaign talking points. I'll just use it as an example because we heard it so many times, but Jane Timken saying she's a mom on a mission, she's got grace and grit, that she's, 150,000 miles on her car. Of course, Josh Mandel, I'm a fighter. He talks about squishy rhino Republicans and the media, the left-wing media, that liberal media who are the enemy as he tries to paint people who are like us in the media. So not a lot unexpected, not a lot of big surprises on the stage. But once again, I do think it's always so important for voters, as many voters as possible, to be able to hear from candidates on both sides of the aisle, the Democrats and the Republicans, so that you know what these candidates stand for. You're not going to see a lot of big policy differences at this stage in a primary election here in Ohio with Republican or Democrat candidates. There were some differences that came out tonight, but but not a lot. They all agree on the border wall. Most of them agree that we should be supporting Ukraine. Most of them, agree that they're very anti-Biden administration economic policies. So you should listen to the debates. If you didn't hear it, we're going to have it online. Don't you keep it up online?
Yep, absolutely.
And you can also, I know Christine has online the Democrats from earlier today. You can compare their answers. I always think it's good to get them out in front of people as often as possible.
Definitely. And I think the moderator this evening did a really nice job keeping everybody on track, Karen.
Karen Kassler, yeah, she's a great journalist. I have a lot of respect for her, and she was doing it by herself. That's tough.
Yes, very tough. Did a good job with that, kept everybody on point, had everybody answer the question. When they needed to be fact-checked, she fact-checked them, despite many of them not liking that very much, but did a good job, and I think there was a lot of substance for people to listen to this evening.
And that's one of the things that is tough, that when you know what people are saying and campaigning on doesn't have a basis in truth. It's not really your job as a moderator to debate the candidates. That's not what you're there for. You're there to present the questions, but you also are not there to give them free rein to say things that are so far away from, divorced from reality. And she made a point of saying, we fact-checked some of your claims and what you just said is not true. Of course, some in the audience did not like that, but that's part of the job of the moderator, is to keep people on task, keep it moving, ask questions that are fair but tough to all of the candidates. And if you know something is just completely untrue, to point it out so that this isn't just a platform to say whatever you want to say.
So this is just the first day of debates. Tomorrow we're going to have another day. We're not going to see the Republican candidates debate like we saw, but we will see the Democratic candidates for governor debate tomorrow evening as well.
And the reason that you won't see the Republicans for governor debate is because Governor Mike DeWine is refusing to do these primary debates. You will see both Democrats, Nan Whaley and John Cranley, who will be meeting on the debate stage tomorrow night. And you know what I think we should point out in this race tonight, the Republican race, as well as the Democrat race for governor, even in the Republican race for governor, our polling is showing a lot of people are still undecided. It's surprising. We are out about a month out from what is supposed to be the May 3rd primary date, if that goes forward, of course. But so many people in these major races are undecided on what lever they're going to pull. And I think that's what makes these debates this year more important than ever. You know, I always think they're important. I think it's important for people to hear from anyone who wants to represent them, whether it's in Washington or at the State House. I always think debates are important, but this year particularly so, because so many people just don't know how they want to vote. So many people are worried about the economy. They're worried about what might happen in Ukraine, what that might mean for the men and women in our military, what it might mean for our finances. I do think it's just vitally important to pay attention to the people who want to represent you.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be curious to see, after we have had this round of debates, ours, up in Cleveland, and now the debate commission, the next round of polling, to see if that undecided number does go down a little bit. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. In fact, I'm wondering if people might be watching this, if they'll let us know, did they change their mind? Did either of the debates change their mind? The one we had last week, the one tonight, has it helped them make up their mind? If you remember, after our debate last week, we did a poll that went on for a few days, and several thousand, more than 3,000 people weighed in, and most of the majority, 50%, about 51% thought J.D. Vance won that debate, that Matt Dolan came in second place. J.D. Vance is a skilled debater. As he demonstrated again tonight, he's very, very quick on his feet, has solid answers ready.
It's not always natural for people to be in that environment and to have to, at the drop of a hat, answer an unexpected question, especially one that might make you uncomfortable. I thought it was interesting that Karen asked each of them questions about those who endorse them, who might have some unfavorables in their own past and how they each handled that. It made me think of it because J.D. Vance said, I'm endorsed by a friend and I'm not, politics encourages you to backstab friends and I'm never going to do that. Very interesting responses, I thought, to those questions tonight.
Yeah, definitely. Guys, if you would like to rewatch the entire thing, we're going to have it in this story on NBC4i.com. It'll be as soon as Colleen and I are done chatting, I'll clip it and put it up for you so you can rewatch the entire thing. I think it'll be good for us tomorrow. I'll suggest it to our producers, during our newscast to do another poll to gauge.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think we can definitely do that.
Yeah.
We'll put that up on our website tomorrow as well. Colleen, anything else that you would like to add?
No, just that, I hope people tune in tomorrow night. I know you're going to have it at NBC4i.com. Again, the Debate Commission debate with the Democrats running for governor. I just hope everybody pays attention to all of the races. There are some big races this year. I always say, don't forget, go all the way to the end of the ballot to the judicial races, even the local judicial races, because the person you're most likely to maybe have to see is a judge for whatever reason, whether you are in domestic court or you may become a crime victim. Pay attention to the judicial races too. Go all the way down the ballot. Pay attention to your school board races or any races that involve your local government as well. I think it's important that we're all part of the process.
Absolutely. All right. So we'll see exactly when this primary is going to be soon. I know
we hope.
Yes, we'll see. All right, guys, more information and again to rewatch the entire debate, go to NBC4i.com. We'll be with you tomorrow evening for another debate as Nan Whaley and Mr. Cranley take the debate stage. So we'll see you all then. Thanks for watching. Bye.